There are moments in life when a person gets caught up in something without even realizing it, and tonight was one of those nights for me. Everything had started out ordinarily, but it carried a breaking point within. An irreversible night. As I sipped my tea in the kitchen, I flinched at the notification that popped up on my phone. It was a message from James. "I'm at the office again tonight. Work is really busy. I'll be home tomorrow night." Before I even finished reading the sentence, a mix of warmth and frustration spread through me. A lie. I had gotten used to these messages by now. Every time he came up with a different excuse, but I knew the truth. There was no us anymore. James's mind and body belonged to someone else. I set my mug down on the counter with a thud. I felt like I couldn't breathe. In the kitchen, in this house, in this marriage, I looked at myself in the mirror. I was 40, but I was still beautiful. My tall, slender figure, my still eye-catching curves, my slightly wavy auburn hair, and yet James's eyes were not on me anymore. A burst of laughter from the living room snapped me out of my thoughts. Liam and Noah, my nephew and his best friend. They had been around a lot lately. Noah worked at his uncle's repair shop during the summers. He was skilled, a little reckless, but undeniably attractive with his strong hands, broad shoulders, and effortless confidence. The kind of man who turned heads without trying. When I walked into the living room, Liam was sprawled on the gaming chair while Noah had sunk his large frame into the couch, both of them glued to the screen, caught up in their competitive fun. For a moment, I watched Noah beside Liam, the faint wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, his sun-kissed arms, his easy smile. He was young, but he was a man. Attractive, yet unpredictable. I took a deep breath. "I'm going out," I said briefly. Liam lifted his head slightly and looked at me. "At this hour?" I shrugged. "Yeah." As I walked out, I felt Noah's brief glance on me, but I acted like I didn't notice. Something inside me had started stirring, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I started the car and drove toward the city center. The sky had darkened, and a mix of restlessness and freedom coursed through me. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but stepping into a bar didn't seem like a bad idea. I wanted to lose myself in the crowd, to forget who I was for a little while. When I entered, the bar was dimly lit. Soft music played in the background, blending with the sound of laughter and conversation. I sat at the bar and ordered a drink. As I took the first sip, I realized that for the first time in a long while, I felt relaxed. Finding myself here, sitting alone, not caring about the night, it was strange, but at the same time, I was letting something I had been suppressing come to the surface. After a while, I noticed that the men around me were looking at me. One of them leaned in, smiling as he tried to strike up a conversation. "Are you here alone?" I lifted my gaze to him. He was a good-looking man, well-dressed, confident, but nothing inside me stirred. I smiled but turned my head away, uninterested. Another one tried to approach, but they were all the same, empty, unappealing. After spending a few hours at the bar, I stepped outside and headed toward my car. The cool night breeze brushed against my skin. I got into the car and turned the key to start the engine, but nothing happened. I tried again, still nothing. My car wouldn't start. I sighed, leaning back against the seat, closing my eyes for a moment. Then suddenly there was a tap on the window. I turned my head and found Noah standing there. "You need a ride?" he asked, his voice calm, steady. I hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, looks like I do." He opened the passenger door for me. As I slid into his truck, the warmth of his presence filled the space between us. The tension, the curiosity, the unspoken words, it all settled in the quiet hum of the engine as he pulled onto the road. The night wasn't over yet. Cursing under my breath, I pulled out my phone and called Liam. "The car broke down," I said simply. Liam's voice sounded sleepy. "Are you serious? Where are you?" I shared my location. "Can you come pick me up?" I heard some movement in the background, then Noah's voice came through. "I got it, Liam. Go back to sleep." I took a deep breath. Knowing that Noah was the one coming stirred something inside me, but I tried to suppress it. As I sat in my car waiting, the silence of the night surrounded me, but the real storm would begin when Noah arrived. If this is your first time hearing confessions like this and you want to support us, join my channel, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Trust me, this story will be one of the most exciting ones for you. A few minutes later, headlights appeared at the corner of the road. Noah got out of the car and tapped on my window. When I rolled it down, he raised an eyebrow and looked at me. "I've never seen you like this before," he said with a slight smile. I was drunk. Hearing the teasing yet gentle tone in his voice made me laugh involuntarily. "Is it that surprising?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. Noah shrugged a little. "It's a nice change." After checking the car, he popped the hood open. "It's just the battery terminals that got disconnected. Looks like the work of some troublemakers." "That's why it wouldn't start." I raised my eyebrows. "What about your car? You drove here, didn't you?" Noah smiled nonchalantly. "It's fine. You're drunk. I can't just leave you like this. I'll pick it up tomorrow." We got into his car and started driving. After a few minutes of silence, I turned to him and asked, "Noah, were you staying at our place? Did I ruin your night?" Noah gave a faint smile, keeping his eyes on the road. "On the contrary, seeing you made me feel better. I couldn't sleep anyway," he said. When we arrived home, Noah parked the car and turned to me. "Should I make some coffee?" I was tired, but his offer warmed something inside me. I nodded. "Yeah, that would be nice." As Noah prepared the coffee in the kitchen, he turned to me. "Alyssa, why do you look so sad?" His question echoed in the quiet kitchen. I lifted my head and looked at him. There was curiosity in his eyes, but also sincerity. He was genuinely asking how I felt. I sighed, my head still spinning slightly, but something inside me had started to unravel. "I don't know, Noah," I said softly. "Or maybe I do, but I don't want to say it." Noah placed the coffee cup on the counter, crossed his arms over his chest, and tilted his head slightly as he watched me. "Don't do this to yourself," he said gently. "It's obvious that something is eating you up inside." I laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "It's not just one thing eating me up, Noah. It's a lot of things. Things that build up over time and eventually overflow. I guess tonight was that overflow moment." At that moment, it felt strange to want to tell him so much. but the understanding in his eyes, the warmth in his voice, they pushed me to speak. I took a deep breath, running my fingers through my hair. "James doesn't care anymore," I said, and as the words left my lips, a sense of relief washed over me. He doesn't care about me, this house, our marriage. He's been living in another world for a long time, and I feel like I'm just hanging in the void. Noah nodded slightly, his eyes never leaving mine. "Is that why you went out tonight?" I averted my gaze. "I don't know, maybe I just wanted to get lost. To be somewhere where no one knew me, where nothing defined me." Noah remained silent for a few seconds, then gave a small smile. "If you want to get lost, maybe what you really need is for someone to find you." At that moment, I felt something inside me unravel, but at the same time, I knew I had to suppress it. I shook my head and tried to stand up, but as I lost my balance, Noah quickly reached out and grabbed my arm. Just then, the kitchen door opened and Liam walked in, his eyes heavy with sleep. His hair was messy and he was rubbing his eyes. "You're back," he said, yawning. Then he frowned as he looked at me. "Alyssa, are you okay?" I smiled. "I'm fine, Liam. Just a little drunk. That's all." Liam furrowed his brows and glanced at Noah, but Noah, with his usual easygoing manner, simply gave a small smile. "It's okay, Liam. I brought her home, and she'll be fine once she gets some rest." Liam sighed and nodded. "All right then, Noah, thanks. I'm going to bed." "Good night." "Good night," Noah replied. I gave Liam a small wave and watched as he headed to his room. When I heard the sound of his door locking, I couldn't help but smile. Liam was always like that, closing off his space, never letting anyone in. When the room fell silent again, Noah turned to me. "Should I take you to your room?" he asked, his voice low but firm. As I tried to stand up again, I stumbled and everything happened so fast. I leaned against him and his coffee cup tilted, spilling the hot liquid directly onto his shirt. "Ah, damn it," he muttered, pulling at his shirt slightly. I flinched, my eyes instinctively locking onto his now coffee-soaked t-shirt. The fabric clung to his chest, outlining the firm muscles beneath. I knew I should look away, but I couldn't. Noah looked at me with a slight smile. "I guess I need to change." I swallowed hard. "Come on, there should be something in James's room. We can't go into Liam's, he locked it as usual." An unintentional smile crossed my lips as we headed toward the bedroom together. As we walked, Noah placed a hand lightly on my back, steadying me, but that touch, it made me feel too much. When we entered James's room, I turned on the light softly and opened the closet, pulling out a t-shirt. "You can wear this," I said, but my voice came out as little more than a whisper. As Noah took the t-shirt, he leaned toward me slightly, his eyes locked onto mine. The distance between us was dangerously small. A moment of silence stretched between us, filled with storms raging inside. Noah's hand lightly brushed against my wrist. "Alyssa," he said in a low voice. Hearing that voice shattered something inside me, because I hadn't heard a voice like that from James in a long time. For so long, I hadn't allowed a man to look at me this way. But now, here I was, and I couldn't escape Noah's gaze. Noah averted his eyes from me and shook his head slightly. "It's nothing," he said, beginning to take off his shirt. But I couldn't suppress the feeling stirring inside me as I watched his body, the strong muscles appearing right before my eyes. I realized I was losing control of something. When Noah moved to put on the t-shirt, a voice inside me told me to stop him, and I listened to that voice. "Stop," I said, my voice soft but firm. Noah froze mid-motion, his hands pressing the t-shirt against his chest as he looked at me. "Why?" he asked, his voice carrying a slight hesitation. Without looking away from him, I took a few steps closer, fueled by the courage of alcohol. I broke free from the chains of emotions I had suppressed for so long. "At the bar tonight," I said, keeping my eyes locked on his, "many handsome, successful men tried to talk to me. They all tried to get my attention." Noah swallowed but said nothing. He just watched me. I took a deep breath, pushing myself further. "But none of them affected me the way you do, Noah." My words hung in the air, the silence of the room merging with the rhythm of our heartbeats. Noah's breathing had quickened, his eyes flickering away from mine, but betraying the battle he was fighting within himself. I held his gaze. "Tell me why." Noah parted his lips as if to speak, then closed them again. He looked like he didn't know what to say, but the look in his eyes told me everything. Finally, he lowered his head slightly, his voice soft but steady. "Because you've been different to me from the very beginning, Alyssa." Something inside me snapped. The space between us had closed so much that I could feel his breath on my face. I didn't know where to put my hands. My mind was clouded, but at the same time, I felt clearer than ever. Noah's hand gently touched my cheek. "We shouldn't do this," he said, but his voice wasn't convincing. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of his touch. "But you want to," I whispered. In that moment, Noah let go of all his hesitation. He lowered his head, his lips nearing mine, and finally, without being able to hold back the emotions that had been building up inside me for years, he kissed me. His kiss was gentle at first, careful, but when I didn't pull away, it deepened. His hands slid to my waist, pulling me closer. When I placed my fingers on his chest, I could feel the rhythm of his heartbeat beneath his muscles. This moment, this feeling, everything about it should have been so wrong, yet it felt so right. We kissed until we were breathless, but this was only the beginning. Noah's breath still lingered on my lips, the air between us charged, and we had reached a point of no return. But suddenly, Noah pulled back, his eyes locked onto mine, as if questioning what he had just done. "Liam," he whispered, his voice filled with concern but also laced with the sparks of desire. I smiled, looking straight at him without blinking. "In his room," I said, my breath still uneven. "The door is locked. If it opens, we'll hear it." Noah hesitated for a moment. Then, as if another thought had just crossed his mind, he asked, "James?" I didn't look away as I smiled, shaking my head confidently. "He's not coming home tonight." As I said those words, I felt a strange lightness inside me, as if I had just broken the chains of a long-standing captivity. Noah was staring at me, but now his eyes held no hesitation, only surrender. "We can lock the door, too," I said, my voice low but carrying a clear invitation. Noah's pupils dilated, his breathing quickened. He paused for a few seconds, then reached out and slowly closed the door. The soft click of the lock echoed through the room, intensifying the tension between us. When he turned around, his eyes landed on my dress lying on the floor. He lifted his head in surprise, only to find me lying on the bed. His gaze slowly traveled over me, and I could see the way he held his breath. There was hesitation in his eyes, but also a desire he was struggling to suppress. I didn't move, I just watched him. "What are you going to do, Noah?" I asked, my voice low and deliberate. At that moment, something inside Noah snapped. Without taking his eyes off me, he moved forward slowly. With steady steps, he approached the bed, placing his knees on the mattress as he leaned in closer to my face. His eyes remained locked onto mine, the space between us almost non-existent. Then, in a hushed and deep voice, he whispered, "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in my life." His words carved themselves into my heart, spreading a warmth inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time. I wanted to say something, but the words got caught in my throat. Noah leaned in even closer, and in that moment, time stood still. When I least expected it, I found my hands on his back. I was drunk, my senses and cognition were dulled, but I was sober enough to feel the enormity of what was happening. It felt better than I could have imagined. I had missed this, and the strangest part was that I liked it more than I ever had before. Maybe it was the intoxication, maybe it was Noah, or maybe it was his strong, solid presence. Noah was panting, his face flushed with excitement. It went on, the intensity building. At one point, my body tensed despite the alcohol, and a sound escaped me. Noah grew agitated. Realizing I needed to be quiet, I removed one hand from his back and covered my mouth. Noah then closed his eyes, his hands tightening, his entire body responding. Finally, I whispered, "Be afraid and don't stop." He let go completely, and I could feel it in every reaction, in the warmth spreading between us. When it was over, he lay beside me, and we talked softly about the beauty of what we had just experienced. Exhaustion took over, and soon we both drifted off to sleep. Time felt suspended, the night stretching endlessly around us. At some point I stirred slightly, my eyes fluttering open to the dim glow of the room. Noah was sitting at the edge of the bed, picking up his t-shirt from the floor. He hesitated for a moment, and I watched him quietly. His movements were careful, deliberate. He turned toward the door, and I could guess what was running through his mind, making sure there was no risk of being caught by Liam or James. It was logical, but this wasn't just about logic. A small smile touched my lips as Noah silently opened the door and stepped out. Just as he was about to leave, I whispered softly, "Noah, this wasn't just the alcohol." He paused but didn't turn around. I continued, letting the certainty in my voice be heard. "I'm looking forward to the days ahead. Wait for me." For a moment he stood there, then the door closed behind him. But I knew this wasn't an ending. It was just the beginning. If this is your first time hearing confessions like this and you want to support us, join my channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Trust me, this story will be one of the most exciting ones for you. It was another one of those nights where Logan was so engrossed in his work that he barely acknowledged my presence. Dinner was nothing more than an endless monologue about upcoming projects at the firm, and yet another cycle of back-to-back meetings. As I sat at the table, I felt invisible. I'd been that way to him for years now. It had become our routine, but tonight something felt different. A small stirring deep inside me, something I couldn't quite ignore. Nathan, Logan's son from his first marriage, my stepson. The moment his name crossed my mind, a heavy weight pressed against my chest. My eyes, as if moving on their own, drifted toward the dim light spilling into the hallway. That room, just a few days ago. I didn't even want to think about it, but I did. Every detail played in my mind like an inescapable loop. Logan had no idea, of course. He was too wrapped up in his company, too busy handling Ava's teenage outbursts, drowning in the chaos of his own world to notice what was happening right under his nose. But Nathan was different. He carried a presence, a quiet intensity that lingered in every room he entered. His eyes, they made me feel seen in a way I hadn't been in years. It was intoxicating. It was terrifying. From the living room, Logan's monotonous voice droned on. I gripped my wine glass tighter, barely registering a word he said. My gaze wandered back to the hallway, to the shifting shadows, to the flickering light that reignited every memory I had tried to suppress. What had happened with Nathan? It was wrong. I knew that. But I couldn't run from the way I felt. Emma, are you even listening? Logan's voice snapped me back to reality as his glass slammed against the table. I turned to him, forcing a smile. Yes, Logan, I said smoothly, but I wasn't really hearing him. The only sound that filled my ears was the pounding of my own heart. Something was shifting. I could feel it, deep in my bones. A storm was brewing in this house, and once it hit, nothing would be the same. Logan continued rattling off numbers and names, shuffling through the papers sprawled across the table, oblivious to the tension in the air. You understand how important this deal is for us, don't you? He asked, his eyes briefly meeting mine. I nodded. Of course, Logan, I know. But I didn't know. I didn't care. The only thing I knew was how empty this house felt, how alone I was in my own marriage, and how Logan hadn't even noticed. My eyes drifted to the other end of the table where Ava sat, our little girl, 13 years old, blissfully unaware. She looked exhausted, her eyelids heavy. Come on, sweetheart, let's get you to bed, I said softly. Ava mumbled a quick goodnight to her father before standing up. I held her hand as we walked to her room, tucking her in and brushing her hair back gently. My eyes lingered on her peaceful face. Good night, my angel, I whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead before stepping out of the room. As soon as I was back in the hallway, the weight in my chest returned. Leaving Logan under the bright lights of the living room, I made my way to my own bedroom, closing the door behind me. And in the quiet, I let myself feel everything I had been suppressing, because I knew the storm was coming. and when it arrived, it would change everything. But the moment I shut the door, that overwhelming guilt clawed its way back to the surface. My breathing quickened, and as I caught my reflection in the mirror, I flinched at the expression on my face.